Beyond Black Rage. And I thought this was also started funny to me because she acknowledges that, like, she was just talking in the previous chapter about there not really being evident cases of black people being violent against white people. She said, shortly after this essay was written, a black man randomly pew-pewed people on a New York train. They were not all white, even though mass media made it appear that was the case. However, the motive behind the random unalivings was depicted as anger at racism. And that's kind of starting. I was just like, ooh, all right, we're getting into like a specific case now. And then what she does with that. So one thing she talks about with that is like this race talk comes up. And she's like, your situation in which this man went on this train and pew-pewed at a bunch of people. First of all, it was sensationalized as him being angry at white people and then like violent against white people. And the reason he did it was because he was mad at white people. But like, when you actually look at the case, he was mad at more than just white people. He was actually mad at the system of white supremacy. He was noting that he was mad at white people and Uncle Tom black folks. Just like way of referring to like black folks as being like traitors and into white supremacy instead of fighting against it. So he was mad at everybody. And he went on the train and he didn't just pew-pew white people. He did that to black people too. And pretty much anybody that was there could get it. So uses this scenario to like deeper into like how media talks about race, how people in general talk about race, and then how they also like talk about rage. And rage gets pathologized. In other words, it gets turned into something that is a sickness and illness. Specifically, let's talk about the definition of pathology, because I was going through this and I was like, I feel like it's important to like what pathology means. So pathology is a study of disease, encompassing its causes, mechanisms, and effects on the body. Focus on the study and diagnosis of disease. So, right, like, talk about rage being a pathology, that's like thinking of rage as like a disease, like something needs to be cured or treated or something like that. And Hooks acknowledges that like rage could amount to something like a pathology, because like in a society of white supremacy can make you go nuts. It can like into something like a mental illness, actually. Can happen, but like being angry, having rage, having a high level of anger is not a pathology in and of itself. It's something that is a justified reaction to injustice. There's not enough acknowledgement for that. And then in some of the ways in which this situation was characterized with this train harming and its defense, the way in which the rage was represented and talked about was just like handled well enough. Like, it could have been handled much more carefully. It could have been handled which we leave space for rage to exist without it being pathological. And when you miss that distinction, when you automatically take rage to be something that's pathological, then you're again not making space for it, and then you again miss the opportunity for that rage to be taken into something that could be militant and used to dismantle white supremacy. That's one of like the points there. Also had this note, who the F is Eric Pooley? He's talking real spicy. So on pages 24 and 25, there's this guy Pooley, and she's responding to like some of the things that he was writing. So she says, a recent editorial in New York Magazine capitalizing on a unaliver by Eric Pooley is an example of this trend. It carried the subtitle, A Spurious Black Rage Defense. Pooley asserts, over and over in the past decade, activists have used black rage as the largely unspoken justification for all kinds of despicable behavior. The outrageous lies of Al Sharpton during the Tawana Brawley caper, the gang situation of teenagers in the Central Park jogger case, which we know now is Central Park 5, and we also know the truth behind that matter, the black boycott of a Korean grocery, the reign of terror in Crown Heights. The black rage theory insults African Americans because it allows any behavior by blacks to be excused, even celebrated, as a response to oppression. But Hooks is critical of Pooley. She's like, she follows up immediately. One wonders how it can be that Pooley knows that black folks attempt to justify corruption on the basis of black rage, if until recently it was never overtly cited as the reason for aberrant behavior. So she's like, nobody was even talking about like justifying black rage in this way before this case on this train, and the attorneys were the ones that tried to justify his actions by means of like this rage narrative. So what's up with that, Pooley? Like, when have we been using this narrative that you're talking about? And yeah, I was just, the reason I was like, who the F is this? He's talking real spicy. I just feel like this Pooley dude sounds like somebody you hear on Fox News. That's really what it is. Like, This whole thing of, oh, this justification you all use is something that actually does a huge disservice to you. And it's like, did we come up with this? Is this something we really use? And where are you getting this from? Anyway, okay. So Hooks has the thing where she talks about living in a white supremacist context, suffering racist discrimination and or exploitation and oppression can create and or exacerbate mental illness. What do you all think about that? Do you think that living in a living in a white supremacist context, suffering from racist discrimination and or exploitation oppression can create and or exacerbate mental illness? I just would like to say with that, like, I agree with this. This is something that I actually thought about years ago, is that I think that it would be just really important to take a mental health evaluation of our society as a whole. I think that means of like practicing racism and all the like that's like in that it's a violence representation or an active violence in actions. I feel like that's just sick. It's sick. White supremacy itself is sick. To feel like the value and worth comes from the subjugation of others is sick. It's misguided to say like a light version of that, but it's sick. Living in a society of white supremacy can of course then create mental illness because it's rooted in mental illness. Suffering from racial oppression, racist oppression, subjugation, and suffering from racist violence, like those things can feel nutty. Specifically, I took a note and I was like, that just reminds me of gaslighting. Especially when you live in a society that denies the racism and you're dealing with it, that like is gaslighting, right? Gaslighting and what it's actually supposed to be is this terms refer to when people are doing things around you or systems are working around you and then like that's being denied. That's literal gaslighting. So, right, like you're living in all this racism and people are like, racism doesn't exist. Root of what I'm saying here is I just feel like, of course, I fundamentally agree with that. I feel like when white supremacy itself is rooted in pathology, I think that it can breed that as well. I feel like it has to produce that. Not necessarily to everyone, but I think that it's just going to produce that in some people and in some spaces because that's what it is. So, yeah, but I kind of wonder what you think about, like, do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? According to Hooks, just because you have rage, you have a high level of anger, that doesn't mean that you're, like, it's necessarily pathology. And Hooks even talked about, like, when she felt violent rage against the man on the plane, she, like, didn't actually do it. And if she had done something about it, then, you know, that is not okay. But at the same time, even though it wouldn't be okay, she doesn't justify that. She would understand it in the context of living under really oppressive, racist conditions. She could understand how someone might end up doing something like that. She could understand how that could happen. It could turn into pathology, but it doesn't justify it. And right, like that anger needs to be appropriately investigated and then used to dismantle white supremacy, not to go on a violent rampage, not to stick in that pathology and just run with that. That's not what we're saying here, right? And Hooks is like doing really good, like distinguish like forms of rage, what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, how to use it, how not to use it. She also has this line on page 26 in which she says, until this culture can acknowledge the pathology of white supremacy, we will never create a cultural context wherein the madness of white racist hatred of blacks or the uncontrollable rage that surfaces as a response to madness can be investigated, critically studied, and understood. And I just was like, woof. Have we come to a place where we can acknowledge the pathology of white supremacy? Have we come to a place where we can talk about the madness of white racist hatred of blacks? Again, hear me out. I'm talking about whiteness as structure. White supremacy as structure. The structure where it says like white is better than black, white hates black, white harms black. It's okay for white to harm black. That narrative, right? Have we come to a place where we can examine the madness of that, the pathology of that? Have we come to a place where we can investigate that and understand what it's doing to us as a society? I don't think we're there yet. Y'all, I really don't think we're there yet. And that's kind of like sad. I feel like we somewhat touch it, But I don't think we're there yet, because I feel like if we were there yet to really like go deep and talk about like the sickness that exists within white supremacy, I feel like we would be able to better target it and like deal with it and like heal from it, to dismantle the systems that are continuing to perpetuate harm. But yeah, that's where I'm at it. I kind of want to know what y'all think though. And I said the last paragraph, woo. So let's see. What does she say? The rage of the oppressed is never the same as the rage of the privileged. Oh, yeah. One group can a lot only by changing the system. The other hopes to be rewarded within the system. Public focus on black rage, the attempt to trivialize and dismiss it, must be subverted by public discourse about the pathology of white supremacy, the madness it creates. We need to talk seriously about ending racism if we want to see an end to rage. White supremacy is frightening. It promotes mental illness and various dysfunctional behaviors on the part of whites and non-whites. It is the real and present danger, not black rage. Yeah, I see why. Oof. Yeah, because I just like, wow. Black rage is a red herring. The real problem is the white supremacy. The real frightening thing is the white supremacy. And so until we deal with that and the pathology behind that, we'll always be missing part of the picture.